books, and joined a startup in town called OurFamilyWizard.com. It's now the biggest family management tool on the web. There's maybe one or two of you out there have heard of it or are users. It's a tool. There you go. It's a tool that helps particularly divorced families help like manage their shared custody schedule, expense log, et cetera, et cetera. And that was a really good, I think, entry point into both the startup world and the thing that I'm kind of most interested in, which is generally kind of people using computers and the internet to interact with each other. And after working there for about 3 years, I got the itch to actually start my own company, and I co-founded a company in town called Eighth Bridge. And we initially built an e-commerce platform that helped retailers take their entire e-commerce site, put it in a little bit of a widget, and put it all over the web. And the idea there was that they would take their entire e-commerce site and throw it on, let's say, a 300 by 250 ad unit, and people would maybe want to buy a product inside of that ad unit without having to click off of the blog that they were reading or something. Well, turned out that premise didn't work out for us all that well, but what we ended up finding out in, I think, what can only be described as sleep-deprived inspiration for a startup, at like 4 in the morning, I realized we could put our little widget inside of Facebook, and that was in 2009 at a time when everybody was scrambling to figure out how to monetize Facebook. Well, we pivoted our entire business, shifted towards Facebook commerce. We ended up winning the Minnesota Cup against 1,100 other companies that year, and raised a whole bunch of money. Went through a couple of rounds. We finally ended up being acquired by an e-commerce agency called Fluid. They're a San Francisco-based e-commerce agency. So after that, I was in the midst of an interesting social experiment where I decided to change my birthday on Facebook to the current day every single day until I didn't get a sincere happy birthday message. And that went on for, believe it or not, over 3 months. So it was on like day 102 or something like that. I literally didn't get any more happy birthday messages. And by that point, I'd gotten like 200 threats to unfriend me on Facebook. I don't think I got any threats to unfriend me in real life, but I did lose a handful of Facebook friends over it. The takeaway that I got from that actually inspired me to do something with Facebook pages, which was start using content and sharing content a lot more frequently than what was the conventional wisdom at the time. And I started building a handful of Facebook pages and sharing that content. At that point, it was like every 3 or 4 hours at a time when people really were teaching you to probably share only a couple times a week because you didn't want to annoy your customers, well, or your fans. Well, on the heels of that, my pages started to grow really, really rapidly, and I built a business around what was my girlfriend at the time and her character out at the Renaissance Festival, and we built her page up to be almost 300,000 likes. I used that same principle to work for Jack Links, and I built their page from 8,000 likes to, I think they're like 1.4 million, and literally dozens of other pages that are north of 50,000 likes. And I did that all based on this principle that I wanted to share a lot more, and I tested a bunch of other theories, and I tested a lot of other things. Well, I finally got to the point where I had 50 Facebook pages, and I couldn't manage them anymore. I was pointing and clicking all day to schedule out content to post 6 times a day times 50 pages. So I decided to just write some software that was taking the files off my computer and sharing them on that same schedule. Well, fast forward like 5 or 6 months, a couple people heard about this little software tool that I built for myself, and they asked me if they could license it. So that was roughly a year ago, probably under a year ago, and I've started building a bunch of different customers that are looking for ways to utilize this kind of automation tool that uses these techniques and uses this technique of making sure that you're posting as often as possible. And investing in the product to make it more self-service, and eventually the product kind of became a company, and now it's called Evergreen, and I've got a handful of customers. I think we're posting about 60 or 70,000 posts a day now on the product, and it's really focused on specifically Facebook, but it also works for Twitter, and is really a tool meant for somebody that wants to get the most out of their Facebook or Twitter, but doesn't have the time to think about, for 45 minutes a day, how do I schedule out 6 posts? How do I write the content? How do I write that original content all the time? And that's what Evergreen does. So I think we're handing over the mic to the next person, right? Oh, okay.
So thank you. That's a great presentation concept. I love the idea. What we'd like to ask from 1 Million Cups is, how can 1 Million Cups in this community help you?
So right now, I'm looking for customers who are kind of open-minded and looking to help guide the future vision of the product. Most of the people that are on it right now realize that it's a product kind of still in kind of a little bit of a beta phase, and people who probably don't have time to run their Facebook or Twitter, but see the value in building up an audience over time.
How do you charge for it?
So yeah, right now it's a $49 a month charge for people that want to connect it to up to 3 different accounts, whether that's your Facebook page or Twitter. And I think most of my customers are kind of in that wheelhouse. There's a couple people who run like little smaller agencies who need more accounts that might have 25 customers of their own, and are trying to figure out a better way to schedule that stuff out.
For the purpose of the audio, could I have the microphone bring it to you for anyone
Sure.
who has questions?
Does the system generate the content?
It doesn't, and I realize that that's the logjam right now. And yeah, so I think there's kind of 2 pieces that question, right? Or 2 pieces to the problem that it's solving. One is, how do I find the time to schedule all this stuff? But number 2, and I think the more time-consuming part of it, is actually finding the content or creating the content. So that's coming down the pipeline. We do that for a handful of customers right now, in a couple different verticals, and we're expanding out to try to find socially proven content that's going to work for your audience. Hi.
Do you have any distinct differentiators from some of the other services out there that are kind of doing the same thing, like Sprout Social and a couple of the other ones?
Yeah, so I think all of those, my tool Evergreen is really a complementary tool to that. And the reason I say that is most of those tools are really about scheduling and analytics. Evergreen is more a tool for managing your Evergreen library of content to fill the gaps when you're not actively scheduling a campaign, right? So this is something that you take content that would be good anytime you shared it. Morning, night, winter, spring, Super Bowl Sunday, New Year's Day, whatever it is, if it gets shared, it's still relevant. These other tools like a Hootsuite or Buffer, Sprout Social, I'm scheduling a campaign. I have the content. I want to make sure I'm sharing this at 8:17 in the morning on a Thursday. Evergreen's not that tool. It's a tool to help you manage that Evergreen content that you want to fill in the gaps for when you're not actively running some sort of social media campaign. Yeah.
Can you give an example of one of your customers, how they use it?
Yeah, I'd say the 2 main examples are one is like a small agency that's offering social media services to their customers, and they themselves were in the same boat that I was a year and a half ago, pointing and clicking and scheduling out content across, let's say 25 customer pages. And instead of, doing that where they're, okay, how do I get these like 3 posts out today? They instead just turn on Evergreen on these pages and make it easy where they just curate the content, put it in their content library, and all of a sudden it just starts filling in the gaps for them. That's a pretty common use. The other common use is, it's just somebody that, has 400 priorities in front of their Facebook, but they also recognize the value, both the social proof and the ability to build a list on Facebook that you can later on market to for free.
So does the system help with us, because there's funds, you have to pay for the advertisements? Does the system, does it like automatically, do I have to tell you like what I'm charging? I mean, what I want to get charged for my ad, so how long it could run?
Right, so Evergreen at the moment doesn't do any integration with Facebook advertising. But what I do tell people is this is a really good way to test how successful your content will work organically. And the best performing organic content is gonna perform best inside of an ad. You can think about it like pouring gas on a fire, right? So you already know that this is gonna work, rather than, I think, what is the kind of traditional method right now, which is put together 4 or 5 different ads, throw it up and hope one of them really performs well on, inside of the Facebook advertising network. This is a better way to say, all right, I'm gonna put a bunch of evergreen content, post for a month straight, look at my last 30 days, take the best performing organic content and turn that into an ad. The Evergreen license doesn't include any advertising with it. That would be something that you'd, I think, be able to take.
You just mainly post on people's, you help people with their page, like it's not
exactly.
like an advertisement, it's just what.
Yep, exactly, yeah. It sounds like we got one question back here.
Way in the back here. You kind
Hi.
of answered part of the question, but I was
Sure.
wondering, with regard to the biggest challenge being finding that organic content and then planning, more or less planning a campaign, just for sake of discussion. Do you have any best practices from some of those customers that have been using it and the results have been getting to help
Yeah.
manage that whole
Yeah, I
concept?
do. So we could talk for probably 8 straight hours on the best ways to do that, but I think I could summarize it in 2 ways. One is any content that fits into one or more of 3 categories, and that's educational, inspirational, or funny. If you can find content that fits those molds, those things do really, really well on Facebook. And if you can hit 2 or all 3 of those things in a single post, you have a very good chance of performing well organically. And then the second part of that question is, where do I find that stuff? And I find a lot of it on other Facebook pages. I find a lot of it on Reddit and Pinterest. And I think the key there is just to not use other people's copyrighted content and use stuff that kind of seems to fit in the kind of public domain and would fit under the fair use qualification. A lot of memes fall right under that, where you've got inspirational quotes, or infographics are a really good one, where you're trying to educate your customer and attract them because they're interested in the information that you're sharing, or comics that fit under that same kind of topic that you're trying to attract people. Does that help? Perfect. So the question, just for the camera, was, am I looking at LinkedIn? Yes. That's not on the immediate priority list, but we'll eventually be integrating into all the social platforms. 1 second. Right here.
I guess my question is what made you decide to start the birthday experiment?
I do a lot of experiments. So what inspired me was, I just was looking at all the people coming out of the woodwork and wishing me happy birthday that I hadn't heard from since high school, right? And I was really curious to see what would happen on the next day when I set my birthday, to see if I'd get a bunch of happy birthday messages. And I got probably 75% as many as I did on my actual birthday. And there's a lot of takeaways that I had from the experiment, but the biggest one was, it was only 2 or 3 weeks after I'd started the experiment, so only 2 or 3 weeks after my actual birthday, that I got the first sincere happy birthday message from somebody who had already wished me happy birthday on my birthday, but they had forgotten that they had done that, right? And the biggest takeaway I had from that was that I think people think of social media content as disposable and single use, right? And the reality is that if your content is good, it's no different than any other media. You should be using it as long as it still performs. And I think anybody who's seen the Jake from State Farm commercial knows that, right? That is a commercial. They are selling you insurance, right? Not exactly a Porsche, right? And that commercial plays during every single break of every single sports broadcast on TV. And even if you go on Twitter right now and you search for Jake from State Farm, half of the comments are, man, this commercial never gets old. And that was the two things that kind of inspired me and kept inspiring me as I was trying to like understand what was really happening with that. Yeah.
Here.
What industries are your current clients in, and how much is a single post worth to you, your company, and how much is it worth to them?
Yeah, well, so I wouldn't say I've got any specific industry that I'm hammering home right now, but I'd say the ones that this seems most attractive to are like solopreneurs, right? Insurance agents, real estate agents. I also think that there's a lot of people that are interested that are in retail, right? That are sharing out their products assortment that's always there, or things to just attract customers that way. How much is a single post worth? That's going to vary based on your industry, how big your audience is, et cetera, et cetera. But I will say that, I think the putting a dollar value on a single post could be, I think, framing the question in the wrong way, because there are tons of other values that are associated with that. Every single post is an opportunity for you to grow your list. By getting somebody to like, comment, and share on it, they're more likely to have that story show up in their friends' news feeds, and more likely for you to attract another customer, and not just necessarily drive X dollars of revenue associated with that. So, I think every industry thinks about that a little bit differently, whether their posts are about relationship management, whether it's about growth for the number of people liking their page, or whether it's strictly about driving sales. Now, how much is it worth to me? Again, it's different audience, different size audience, different industry or vertical. But some of my pages that, if all I'm doing is sending it off to some website, I know that I can get, 3 to 5% of my audience to click on a link to send them to that site, right? And you can kind of backtrack into that. If I was just running ads on a site like that, it could be worth, fractions of a penny for every click that I send over there. Another way to think about it is I could be driving people to sign up for an email list or, buy a product. And I've experimented with all of those things. And, it ranges from literally a tiny fraction of a penny to several $100s for a single post. So yeah, it can be all over the map. Hi. He's going to grab the mic for you really quick.
Well, okay. Well, it sounds like a very interesting software, something that I will use. But I think for me is I'm a person on the go.
Yeah.
And I'm always constantly, most of us here are probably married to our phone.
Yeah.
And I just noticed, I was just looking at your site, and I know it's not mobile ready yet, and I know everything is always about being responsive and mobile friendly, because mobile is a big thing now, and everybody's on their phone, and especially in business, we're constantly playing with our phone. Everything we need to do, answer emails, and I think it's a software that I can easily go on there and log on and post everything right onto all my multiple social networks. But when are you planning to make it mobile friendly?
As soon as I can afford to. So I'm bootstrapping the company right now. I don't have any outside financing or anything. I'm just taking the revenue that we've got from the customers and turning that into, I think, the things that are the highest demand from the customer base that we have. I'd say making it multi-platform supported is something that we're going to try to get done this year. And that's all I can say about that, depending on the trajectory of the company.
We only have time for one more question. Now we're here.
Hey, it seems to be the biggest problem with Facebook is expanding the reach of your posts, exposure. So is there any way of expanding that, because posts don't typically be seen, or typically not seen by a lot of people?
Yeah, I think that's the most frequent question I ever get. And, I think the challenge there is that I think most people assume that Facebook's deliberately throttling back the reach so that they can sell more advertising. And, I don't think there's a ton of evidence actually to suggest that, but there is a ton of evidence that there are more posts coming from more people and businesses and pages than there ever have been, and it's accelerating faster than the number of people signing up for Facebook or the number of minutes people spend on Facebook every month. So the newsfeed becomes way more competitive. And right now, the best way to increase the reach of an individual post is, and the most tried and true way, is to spend money on it, right? But I tell people that spending money on a post that you want people to see is not a very effective technique. What's more important is that you find out the content that people most want to see, and then use that content to put paid advertising behind it, because it's going to perform better organically on top of the paid media that you have. So that's step one, right? But not everybody wants to hear that. Not everybody wants to hear, I want to spend, the only way I can get more reach on a post is spend more money. But I can tell you, I've done lots and lots of social experiments. One of the craziest ones that I did, other than the birthday thing, is I posted on one page 14,000 times in a minute to see what would happen. And strangely enough, it was probably the single best thing I ever did for the page. It was the biggest day for growth, for reach, for interactions, everything. So I tell people that if what you want is to get a bigger reach for your individual post, you might want to rethink about your goals and think that the real value is not getting the individual reach maximized, it's looking at it in aggregate. So if your reach is only reaching like 3 to 5% of your audience on an individual post, it doesn't make sense to post only 3 or 4 times a week thinking, well, I'm only reaching this many people and I don't want to annoy the people that I am reaching. Instead, think about, how can I post 6 times a day? And what impact is that going to have on my reach, my growth, my brand awareness, the affinity that my fans have with me and my brand? And what I think invariably you'll find is by posting more often, you're going to reach more people, and it's going to give you more data points to understand what kind of content you should be sharing with your customers to attract more of them. And I have yet to find really good, solid evidence that by posting too frequently, that's going to annoy your customers when the content is good, right? If your customers are annoyed by your content, that is indicative of the quality of your content, not the frequency. Does that help? Perfect.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Lou, and a big round of applause for Lou with Evergreen.
Thanks, Austin. Appreciate it.